Hiya, my name's Charlie and welcome to my channel and welcome to my weekly reads. How are you guys this week? Let me know in the comments below. Always love a good natter with you guys. As you can tell today, I'm wearing my dinosaur jumper. It's like my little T-Rex. When I was a kid, I was obsessed with dinosaurs. And personally, yeah, you just can't go wrong with dinosaurs, and especially when it's got like pink and stuff like that. So yeah, so that's that. Yeah. So in terms of my weekly reads, since last I spoke to you, I finished up reading Not Without Laughter by Langston Hughes. I did talk about this in last week's video. I don't really have a whole lot more thoughts on it, but to give you a brief summary what the plot is about in case you missed it from last week. This is a Renaissance classic set in Kansas in the early 1900s, and it was published in 1930. And we follow a racially divided community, and specifically we follow a young boy called Sandy at the beginning of the book and his family. And yeah, it's sort of, yeah, it's the tale of like living in the town and, like I said, in that community. So yeah, obviously it's got some very hard-hitting themes, and sort of yeah, like I said, you sort of see Sandy as he grows up in this community. I feel like I'm repeating myself, but you get what I mean. It's a real, like, this is my first whole length novel by Langston Hughes, and I just thought it was really, really good. Looks like, you can see my book tab at the back end. And I do recommend it. I listened to the audiobook, which is on Scribd, so if you have Scribd, it's a good way of getting hold of it. Yeah, it's definitely one I feel like I will get more out on a reread, because obviously, like I said before, with classics, and also not just with classics, with just books in general, I think the more you read, like the more you read them, you get more out of them. So yeah, this will be one I keep and go back to. So that's that one. I also finished The Pages and Co book by Anna James. This, like I said, is the 5th book in the Pages and Co series, and we follow Milo in this book, which again, I can't really spoil it because Milo comes from a special train which you discover in, I can't remember which number book he comes in, but a few books in. But yeah, so yeah, this is just a really fun book, and I can't wait for the last book in the series, which is due to come out at the end of the year. So yeah, if you haven't read the Pages and Co series, I highly recommend it. It's just loads of fun. Like this in particular, I forgot to show you guys last week as well. Like all of that, if you have the hardbacks, you get, like, I mean, they all come in these copies. I've got the first, not the first one. The only book I do not have the hardcover for is the first one, which I'm so annoyed with myself for. I will probably have to try and track it down. So, yeah. But yeah, this is really, really good. So yeah, recommend the Pages and Co series. Can't go wrong with jumping with characters that go into other stories, can you? Like that's like I feel like that's like a dream of like most bookish people. Tell me if I'm wrong. Yeah. So then, right, in terms of what did I finish next in the other books, I haven't read as much this week. I've just been busier. This is what happens, obviously, some weeks in our lives are busier. So a book I actually finished is Someday Maybe by Onyi Nwabineli, and this is one that when I think I started it like a couple of weeks ago, and when I first read like the first few pages, I think I told you guys that like it was a 5-star prediction, and it was indeed for me a 5-star book, and I will tell you why. But before I tell you why it was a 5-star read, I want to tell you that this book comes with lots of content warnings, and I do not think, in terms of my even though I gave it a 5 stars, this book is not a book I would recommend for everybody. I think it's a book that you should only read if you can cope with the things I'm about to tell you. So in this book, in case you don't know, we follow the lead character of Eve, who's I'll put all the content warnings on screen. The content warnings for this book are, so before I go into the details of the what this book is about, obviously, the content warnings are suicide, grief, self-harm and blood, and so obviously if any of those things like will deeply affect you, don't listen to this, like this what I'm about to give you, like the kind of, I won't go into too many details obviously, but switch it off if you don't want to know anything about it, or if it triggers you too much. So yeah, so yeah, this book we follow Eve, and she has at the beginning of the book not long discovered Quentin, or Q as she calls him. How she found her husband dead in the apartment, and it was evidenced that, like, they found out that it was death by, obviously it was death by suicide, and it's obviously very horrific. At the beginning of the book, that's like, in terms of the graphicness of things that happen, they don't happen at the beginning, and you don't actually, and even nothing is ever super expert. I think there's like one or two graphic mentions. There is mentions of blood from the beginning, and later on it's described a little bit more in detail of how Quentin took his life. So obviously none of these things go into lightly. So just bear that in mind. But it, like, for me, I didn't think it was overly graphic, and I don't think it was gratuitous. That's what I wanted to say. I don't think it was sort of like overly done, and I don't think it was put there for shock value or anything like that. It was all done very carefully, in my opinion. Obviously, I haven't lost anyone I haven't lost anyone to suicide, and so, like, obviously I can't speak on behalf of any of that, obviously, so, right, for that reason. But yeah, so yeah, so anyway, so the reason, so we follow Eve, and we basically the whole book is about her grief, and it does go in a sort of like almost, I would say, like cyclical pattern. So some critiques I've heard of this is that some people feel like Eve is in her grief too long, I think someone said, or they feel like it sort of goes over the same material. But so in terms of this story, yes, Eve is in her grief a long time. And in fact, Eve is in her grief the majority, if not, I would say, all of the book. There is no magical fix, no magical cure for Eve's grief, which is one of the things I actually thought was the most realistic to me, like in terms of my own personal experience with grief. Obviously, like I said, I haven't lost anyone to suicide, but so that's what I most loved about this book, and most connected in the way of how she discusses grief. She doesn't try to make the author doesn't try to make grief look pretty. She doesn't try to sugarcoat it in any way, and yes, Eve is in her grief a lot, and the way like she's got this. Another thing I loved about this family, that this is her family. So Eve has got a Nigerian family who are very, very. But the thing about this family is they're there for her. She's got a mother, a father. Her mother and both her mum and dad are doctors. I think her mum's an oncologist, and her dad's a neurosurgeon, which might be a little bit far-fetched for some people, but I don't know. She's got a brother called Nate, who I just love. He's sort of like, she's got also, so I'll get back to Nate in a second. So she's got an older sister called Gloria, or Glow, and she is a lawyer, and her younger brother Nate. So obviously they've sort of all got career plans, but Nate doesn't really have that career plan at the beginning of the book, especially. But the family relationships in this book I just loved so much, and actually all, like, not all the relationships, because there's another one that I won't tell you about, but yeah. So yeah, and also there's a best friend called Eve has a best friend called B, which I also really loved. But yeah, so they support Eve through all this, but obviously they are there for her. But Eve kind of doesn't, obviously. She obviously rejects a lot of that support because of everything she's going through. I say rejects, but yeah. So but they are there for her, which I loved. I loved that element. If any of you guys know me, families in books and strong, supportive families, I just adore. And yeah. But it's not always easy for them in how they support her, obviously. And it's like, again, like I said, it's quite rightly, it shouldn't be, because like I said, grief is messy. It's all these different things. My personal experience, obviously everyone's experience of grief is different. Grief is a unique personal thing, so everybody experiences grief differently, and that is something, like, obviously that I am aware of, and that we like, obviously, so your experience of grief might be different from my experience of grief, and vice versa. Like, there's many different forms of how we grieve. There's no one way to grieve, is there? I'm sure we can all agree on that. Right. So anyway, right. So yeah, I just adored this book. But yeah, if you're looking for a book that sort of has magical answers, which that's in terms of like, this isn't right. This book is not a plotty book. It's mostly just a character-driven book. There is plot within it, and there is stuff that happens within it, but that is not the focus of this book. But that being said, so I don't think this book will be for everybody. I think that this book, if it does make this book is eligible for the Women's Prize long list next week. So if it does make it, I do think it would divide opinions. I don't think everybody would like it, but that wouldn't bother me in terms of that, because me personally, I love this book. I love this book. I love this characters. I loved the way it was done, and I feel like this could be a favourite of the year for me, for sure. So that is why I gave it 5 stars. Right, that is that. In terms of what I'm currently reading, I'm currently listening to The Eyes Were Watching God by Zora Neale Hurston. This was on my books I wanted to read this year. It was one of my bookish goals. I think it's one of Diverse Spine reads, and Deborah from Booking with Deborah told me that the audiobook was really good, and I saw it on Scrib, so I was like, okay. So I've started that. I haven't long started it, so I'm not really going to talk about it here. But if you guys are interested in reading Their Eyes Were Watching God, or reading anything by Zora Neale Hurston, it is available on Scribd. So there you go. I've also started reading on my Kindle a non-fiction book called Sanatorium by Abi Palmer. This is a book I had spoken about by Bob from Bob the Bookerer, whose channel I absolutely love, so I'll link his channel below. He was talking about, obviously he does weekly reads as well, which I also highly recommend, and yeah, he was talking about one had been recently, obviously currently read that week, and obviously that was the book. I think this book was a long-listed or a short-listed Barbellion. It was long-listed or short-listed for the Barbellion Prize. Now, the Barbellion Prize is a book prize which is dedicated to the, I'm reading because I've got my notes in front of me, dedicated to the furtherance of ill or disabled voices in writing. And it's a prize which is awarded annually to the author whose work has best represented the experience of chronic illness and or disability. So yeah, and I know, like, I have read a couple of the winners. Previously I read Golem Girl, and I've also read, my brain is going, I'll put it on screen, I think it was like 2021's winner, I think that's the one I read. So this, Bob, as Bob was describing it, he sold it completely to me. It's basically, so in terms of on Storygraph, it's described as a non-fiction poetry, and so it's about a young woman who has chronic pain, and she goes to a sort of water rehabilitation facility in Budapest. So yeah, and it's sort of, the book as you read it is written in sort of a fragment, obviously, like it said, poetry, so obviously it's kind of like a fragmented style. Some of the pages are sort of more filled with text, and some of them are just, like I said, little fragments. I can't think of the other word. Do you see what I'm saying? On the screen, so little blocks of text, paragraphs of text on some of the pages. Yeah, it's very, very short. I think it's only just over 200 pages, and I think I'm only a little bit of the way in, because again I've been slower with my reading this week, but everything I've read so far of it I have enjoyed. So I was kind of looking for some shorter books to sort of, so that I ideally want my reading finished before the long list for the Women's Prize is announced next week, which obviously I'll speak about in a minute. So yeah, that's that. That is all my weekly reading. As I've spoken about the Women's Prize, oh my days, I am so excited for it. So let me know, are you guys excited for the Women's Prize? Tell me what books you think are going to be sets for the long list. What books do you want on the long list, if you are indeed interested in it? In case you guys don't know, me and my lovely friends Jem from Gemma Books, and Alice from Alice and the Giant Bookshelf, we are hosting a read-along for the Women's Prize books this year called the Women's Prize Plot Along. So you're welcome, all you guys are welcome to come and join us. In fact, actually this week we launched an Instagram for it, which I'll put on screen. I think it's, the letters are WP Plot Along. So I'll put like a link to that in the description as well. So feel free to come and join us. Also, we've got a live show on Tuesday. I think I'll put the time on screen for the live show. It's going to be on Alice's channel. So go check that one out. That's going to be like my most exciting things, and plans for next week is basically all going to be around the Women's Prize and trying to track down those books. So yeah. In terms of, I've got like a dead foot, excuse me. My foot has gone to sleep. So in terms of this week, what have I been up to? So I did all the bookish things like I told you about at the library. They were so much fun. The kids were amazing. It's been just brilliant in that way. But yeah, I've had a good week. I've also in terms of YouTubey things, Friday night I did a live show with Charlie from Charles Heathcote. I'll link channel below. So if you want to go and watch the replay of our live show, I will link it down below. And speaking of live shows, today, just like this afternoon, it was because again, you guys know I film this on Saturdays, or most Saturdays. I've just watched the lovely Victoria from What Victoria Read and Aoife from Pretty Purple Polka Dots hosted the live show for this month's Sisteralong discussion, and that was just so much fun. So again, I will link the replay of that in the description. All these channels I recommend, all these people I think are brilliant, so obviously feel free to go and watch them below. Let me know what you guys are up to. Let me know, like I said, let me know what you guys have been up to this week. Let me know what you guys are reading. Let me know if you guys are excited for the Women's Prize. Let me know all of the usual things, and just have a good old natter with me in the comments below. And sending you guys lots of love. Take care.